I had always thought I was an outsider, even in my own family. My name is Ethan Montgomery, and I'm 32 years old. I've spent most of my life as the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background while everyone else moved forward. My brother, Daniel, always got the attention, always made the right moves. He had the perfect life, a successful career, a perfect family, and a place at the head of the table. I, on the other hand, always felt like I didn't quite belong, even though we shared the same blood. The Montgomerys had everything, money, power, influence, but it all felt like a distant dream to me. In their eyes, I was just a screw-up, the one who couldn't measure up. But I never expected to get a phone call from beyond the grave. It came at 1 a.m. The first ring startled me out of sleep. The old landline's shrill tone echoed in the apartment. It was strange, no one ever called me at this hour. Not even my family. Not since Grandpa died. I wiped my face, confused, and grabbed the receiver. My hand trembled. I never used the landline much, but there I was, staring at it as it continued to ring. The silence of the apartment felt suffocating. Hello? My voice was rough, hoarse from sleep. Ethan, a familiar voice whispered, cracking with age but unmistakable. Open the door. I'm cold. I froze. My grandfather's voice. William Montgomery. The man who'd raised me after my parents split, the man who had taught me about loyalty, honor, and power. He had been gone for 4 years. Gone, buried in a cold grave. There was no way he could be calling me now. A chill ran down my spine. I should have hung up, walked away from whatever this was, but something inside me, something I didn't understand, kept me glued to the phone. Grandpa? I asked, my voice cracking. Is this really you? The line went silent for a long, agonizing moment. Then, the voice, still faint but familiar, spoke again. I'm cold, Ethan. Open the door. A shiver raced through me. I wanted to believe it was some kind of joke, a prank. But something about it felt too real. I stood, heart pounding in my chest, trying to make sense of it. My grandfather had died years ago. What was this? Was it a dream? Was I just losing my mind? I wasn't sure what to do. The call ended as abruptly as it had started, leaving only silence hanging heavy in the room. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, still holding the receiver. My fingers were numb from the cold of the phone, and my thoughts were racing. I told myself to shake it off. Maybe it was a glitch, some sort of twisted coincidence. Or maybe I was losing it, finally cracking under the weight of everything. But then, I heard something. A soft knock on my door. I froze again, my pulse quickening. No way. The knock came again, louder this time, urgent. Tap, tap, tap. I swallowed hard, suddenly more terrified than I had been in years. I wasn't sure if I should open the door. I wasn't sure I wanted to open the door. But the knocking wouldn't stop, and the voice on the phone, his voice, kept echoing in my head. Open the door, Ethan. I'm cold. I crept toward the door, trying to control my breathing, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I peered through the peephole, barely able to make out anything in the darkness. A figure stood there, hidden in the night. It can't be him. I felt my stomach drop. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Could this be a prank? Someone playing a sick joke on me? Or was it something worse? Something I didn't want to think about? The voice on the phone came back again, clear in my mind. I'm cold. I couldn't ignore it. The fear was overwhelming, but the need to understand was stronger. I had to open the door. I reached for the handle, taking a deep breath. My hand shook as I turned the knob. The door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, biting at my skin. But no one was there. Just the quiet, empty hallway, as still and silent as ever. The darkness seemed deeper than it should have been, stretching endlessly down the corridor. I stepped out into the hall, my eyes scanning the space. There was nothing. No one. Then I saw it. A piece of paper fluttering on the floor. It wasn't there before. It was just sitting there, in the center of the hallway, waiting for me to pick it up. I crouched down and reached for it, my breath shallow, my hand still shaking. I unfolded the paper. It was a letter. My grandfather's handwriting. The ink was smudged in places, but the message was clear. They're coming for you, Ethan. Trust no one. Your life is in danger. Look to the past. My throat went dry. What the hell was going on? I felt dizzy, disoriented, like the world around me was shifting in a way I couldn't control. The shadows of the hallway seemed to stretch further. My mind raced back to the phone call, to the words, "I'm cold. Open the door." And now, this letter. I was being dragged into something I didn't understand. A game. A trap. But it was real, too real, and I was already in it. I stood up, the letter still in my hand. My grandfather had known something. Something I wasn't prepared to face. I heard footsteps echoing down the hall, distant, but growing closer. I turned to look. The hallway was empty, but I wasn't alone anymore. And the darkness that had seemed like a comfort just moments ago felt colder than it ever had before. I stood in the hallway, my heart thumping in my chest, the letter still clutched in my hand. The cold air that had rushed in with the open door clung to my skin, and the shadows of the night seemed to press in on me from all sides. I had to keep my wits. I couldn't afford to let panic take over. The letter was clear, they're coming for you, Ethan. Trust no one. Your life is in danger. Look to the past. The last sentence echoed in my mind. Look to the past. But what did that mean? What could it mean? My grandfather had been dead for years. He had no reason to contact me. No reason to send me a message like that. I stepped back into the apartment, my feet dragging as I closed the door behind me. Something wasn't right, but the question gnawed at me, what was I supposed to do now? I glanced at the clock on the wall, 1:15 a.m. My hand shook as I tried to dial my brother, Daniel. He was the one I'd always turn to when things got bad. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I wasn't sure if I could trust anyone. The phone rang, but Daniel didn't pick up. I tried again. Still nothing. The weight of the situation hit me like a freight train. There was something off about this whole thing, the call, the letter, the way everything had unfolded so far. My grandfather had always been the one to keep things running smoothly in the Montgomery family, the one with all the answers. And now it felt like I was left holding the pieces of a shattered puzzle. I needed to find out what he meant. There was one place I hadn't checked. I grabbed my jacket and left the apartment, my breath fogging in the cold. The streets were deserted, the only sound the rhythm of my boots against the pavement. I had to go to his house, the old mansion where he'd lived. The house that had been in the family for generations. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. A place that hid more than just memories. As I walked, the fear began to settle in. I knew I couldn't trust anyone, not even Daniel. It was clear now. The Montgomerys had always been a family of secrets, of hidden truths buried under layers of power and lies. And I was at the center of it all, without even knowing why. I arrived at the mansion, its towering figure looming in front of me like a ghost of the past. The place looked abandoned, its windows dark, its gates creaking in the wind. It was cold here, colder than it should have been, and it felt like I wasn't alone. I fumbled for the keys to the front door, my fingers slick with sweat. As I unlocked it and stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like it was waiting for something to happen. I had to know what was going on. I had to know why Grandpa had reached out to me. I moved through the house slowly, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The old wooden floors creaked under my weight, each step making my heart beat faster. The mansion was vast, filled with rooms that hadn't been opened in years. I made my way toward his study, the place where I had spent countless hours listening to him talk about our family's legacy, about the future of the Montgomerys, about power and control. I approached the door. It was slightly ajar. A faint light flickered from inside, and I hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. What I saw made my blood run cold. The study looked exactly as it had when Grandpa was alive. Bookshelves lined the walls, a large mahogany desk sat in the center of the room, and the faint smell of cigars lingered in the air. But that wasn't what stopped me. It was the chair. Someone was sitting in it. The figure in the chair was shrouded in darkness, but I could make out the outline of a man, a tall figure, hunched over slightly. I froze. "Ethan," a voice rasped, low and familiar. It sounded like Grandpa's voice, but not quite. I stepped forward, my heart hammering in my chest. "Grandpa?" The figure turned slightly, and I could see the faint outline of a smile. But it wasn't a smile that comforted me. It was a smile that sent chills down my spine. "I told you to look to the past, Ethan. But you haven't been listening, have you?" My throat tightened, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. What the hell was going on? "I don't understand," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. The figure leaned forward, and the dim light caught the edges of his face. My breath caught in my throat. The face was wrong. It was familiar, but it wasn't Grandpa's. It was someone else. Someone who looked like Grandpa. "Trust no one," the figure said again, his eyes glinting with a dark, unsettling knowledge. "Not even your own blood." I stumbled backward, my heart racing. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the shadows. I stood there, in the middle of the room, struggling to catch my breath. What was happening? Who was that? What did they mean by not even your own blood? And why did it feel like someone had been watching me this entire time? I turned to leave, but then something caught my eye. On the desk, there was an envelope. It was sealed with dark wax, an old seal I hadn't seen in years. I approached the desk slowly, my fingers trembling as I reached for the envelope. It had my name on it. Ethan Montgomery. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter, my heart pounding in my chest. "Do not trust Daniel," it read. "The truth is buried in your bloodline. Find it before it finds you." My breath caught. Not Daniel? I couldn't process it. Everything was spinning. My family, my life, everything I thought I knew, had it all been a lie? A soft noise behind me made me turn around. The door to the study slammed shut. I was trapped. And the darkness in the house was closing in. I should have listened to the warning. I should have stayed away from that mansion, from the things that were pulling me deeper into the shadows of my family's past. But now, standing at the edge of my grandfather's study, my hand trembling as I looked at the letter, again, I couldn't stop myself. The message was clear. The old man had left me something. Something big. But what? What was he trying to tell me, and why was it hidden here, in this cold, forgotten place? My mind raced. I stepped closer to the desk, the air thick with the scent of old wood and dust, the only sound my quickening breath. The house was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that makes you feel like someone is watching you. That sense that something is wrong, but you can't pinpoint what. And then, of course, the chair. The one Grandpa always sat in when he was about to tell me his secrets, the one that now sat empty, waiting for me. I reached for the letter again, my fingers brushing over the wax seal. "Trust no one," it had said. That was the key, wasn't it? My grandfather, a man who had built his empire on trust and manipulation, was now warning me not to trust anyone. Even Daniel. Especially Daniel. I wasn't sure what I'd expected when I stepped into this house. Answers, maybe? Closure? But nothing about this place ever gave me closure. It only raised more questions, questions that were buried deep in my bloodline, and the very house I stood in. The same blood that had shaped my future, that had shaped all of us. My grandfather had been the king of this world, pulling strings, making deals, and keeping his family under his thumb. And now, his cryptic message, his warning, had sent me spiraling into something I couldn't control. A soft creak broke the silence, pulling me out of my thoughts. I froze. Someone was here. I turned swiftly, my heart leaping in my chest. But there was no one in the doorway. No footsteps. Just the haunting emptiness of the house, the walls that had held my grandfather's secrets for years. I stepped back into the room, scanning the space. Nothing. Get it together, Ethan, I muttered to myself, shaking off the feeling. My mind kept returning to one thing, the message. The letter. Find the truth before it finds you. What did that mean? And what truth was he referring to? The old man had hidden too much. Too many secrets. I turned my attention back to the desk, my eyes landing on the old photo frame. It was dusty, the glass cracked, but I could make out the image inside. It was me, as a child, sitting next to Grandpa. His arm was around my shoulder, a rare moment of warmth in the cold legacy he'd left behind. He'd been the one who always told me that blood was everything, that family came first. But now it felt like that had been a lie. My hand reached for the frame, but as I did, something caught my eye. A small slip of paper was tucked underneath it. I pulled it out, my fingers stiff as I unfolded it. The key is in the vault. I froze. The vault. My grandfather's most prized possession. The one place in the mansion that was never mentioned, not even in the will. No one had ever seen it, except for him. It was said to contain everything he had built, the family's legacy, the wealth, the truth. If this was true, then everything I had known was a lie. I turned toward the door, the letter still in my hand, my mind racing with questions and half-formed answers. The vault. I had to find it. But I wasn't alone here. The house felt like it was closing in on me, like the walls were shifting, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. I walked toward the hallway, every step echoing in the empty space. There was a cold breeze now, coming from nowhere, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't help but look over my shoulder. The silence felt wrong. It wasn't just the house. It was something deeper, something I couldn't explain. I stopped at the end of the hall, the last door on the left. It was always locked. No one had ever entered. Grandpa's office, his sanctuary. He'd always told me to stay out. But now, everything had changed. I hesitated. The key was in my pocket, the old family key, the one I had inherited, the one I was supposed to keep safe. But the letter had said, trust no one. Did that mean Grandpa hadn't trusted me either? I inserted the key into the lock, feeling the weight of it in my hand. The door clicked open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight, blocking out the sunlight. The air was stale, like it hadn't been touched in years. But something felt off. Something felt wrong. My grandfather's desk was exactly where I remembered it, his leather chair still behind it, untouched. But there, in the corner, in a locked cabinet. I approached the cabinet slowly, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't know what I was about to find. But I knew I had to find it. The truth. I reached for the handle. And then, a voice. Soft. Cold. Familiar. Ethan. My hand froze. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. There, standing in the doorway, was Daniel. He was holding something. A thick manila envelope. His face was pale, his eyes wide. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. He smiled, but it was empty. I think we both know what's going on, he said, his voice low. My stomach churned. What was he doing here? How much did he know? And then, before I could react, he stepped closer. I wouldn't open that cabinet if I were you, he said quietly. Some things are better left buried. I backed away, the blood draining from my face. The envelope. What was Daniel hiding? And why did it feel like I wasn't the one who had control anymore? The door slammed shut behind me. The room felt smaller now. More suffocating. The walls seemed to close in with every second, like the mansion itself was watching me. Waiting. My mind was racing as I stood frozen in front of the cabinet. Daniel's words echoed in my ears, as chilling as the air that now seemed to crawl through the house. Some things are better left buried. I had to know what was inside. The photo, the letter, the key, everything had led me here. But Daniel's sudden appearance, the way his words hung in the air like a heavy fog, made me hesitate. Was he trying to protect me, or was he trying to keep something from me? I swallowed hard, ignoring the gut feeling gnawing at me. Slowly, I reached for the cabinet handle. It was cold to the touch, colder than it should have been, almost like it had been waiting for me to touch it. The sound of the lock turning was louder than it should have been in the stillness of the house. The door creaked open. Inside, there was a box. Not just any box, this one was old, covered in dust, the edges fraying as though it had been here for years, hidden from the world. It was the kind of thing you only found in stories, the kind of box that held the secrets of your past, your family. My family. I carefully lifted the box from the shelf, feeling the weight of it in my hands. There was something wrong with it, something that made the air around me feel thicker. The mansion had gone from silent to oppressive. I could feel it in my bones. I wasn't alone. I took a deep breath. The box creaked open under my touch, and inside was a collection of old documents, yellowed with age. My heart hammered in my chest as I shuffled through them. There were names I didn't recognize, dates I didn't understand, and a single, familiar name, mine. My grandfather's handwriting was scrawled on the top of the first page. The next sheet was an old deed. My eyes widened as I saw the name of the mansion, our mansion, written on it, signed in the same shaky handwriting. But there was something else. A note at the bottom, for Ethan. A legacy to protect. A truth to uncover. A cold shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't just a family secret. This was something bigger. I flipped through more papers, my hands trembling. There were accounts, financial records, investments, nothing that made sense. Until I got to the last sheet. It was a will. But not my grandfather's will, the one that had been read out to the family after his death. This was a different will. One that changed everything. My breath hitched as I read the first line. In the event of my death, the inheritance will be passed on to my grandson, Ethan, under the condition that he uncovers the truth behind the foundation. The foundation. The one that had always been a mystery. The one no one ever talked about. A dark cloud settled over my mind as I realized what this meant. This wasn't about money. It was about something far more sinister. I glanced up. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, I heard the creak of a floorboard. I froze. The mansion was too quiet, and yet, I wasn't alone. I wasn't imagining it. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hall, slow and deliberate. My heart raced as I glanced around. I grabbed the box and quickly shoved it back into the cabinet, slamming it shut. I moved toward the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Someone was coming. The handle on the door turned. I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. The door creaked open, and there he stood, Daniel. His eyes were different now, harder, colder. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. The tension in the room was thick, suffocating. I could see it in his eyes. He knew. He knew I'd found it. What did you find, Ethan? His voice was low, almost too calm. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was too scattered, too shocked by what I'd just uncovered. I know what you're thinking, he said, taking a step into the room. But some things are better left buried. Trust me. His words twisted something inside me. There was a warning in his voice, but it wasn't enough to stop me. Why did Grandpa leave this for me? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel's gaze hardened. He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. Because he knew. He knew that you were the only one who could handle it. I didn't move. Handle what? He sighed, the weight of the answer pressing down on him. The foundation, Ethan. It wasn't just a charity. It was a front. For something far more dangerous. I felt a cold rush of fear. The mansion, the family, my inheritance, everything had been leading to this moment. The truth was slipping through my fingers, just out of reach. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. Daniel's lips curled into a tight smile. Because you weren't ready. You still aren't. I took a step toward him, anger and fear mixing in my chest. You don't get to decide that, I spat. I want the truth. All of it. He stepped back, his face shifting into something darker, more guarded. You don't want to know the truth, Ethan. Not really. I could feel it now, the weight of his words. The pressure building in the room. There was something he wasn't telling me. Something he was hiding. And I wasn't going to stop until I found out what it was. Before I could speak again, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the darkness. The door slammed behind him, and I was left with nothing but the silence, and the truth that was just out of my reach. The truth is a dangerous thing. But the lie is far worse. I stood in the empty room, my heart still racing. I didn't know who to trust anymore, but I knew one thing for certain, this was just the beginning. And I was getting closer. I should have listened to Daniel. I should have walked away. But the truth, it was too tempting, too dangerous. I was already in too deep, and now, there was no turning back. I hadn't slept since I found the box. The weight of it, the secrets it held, were gnawing at me. It was all I could think about. My grandfather's legacy, Daniel's cryptic warnings, and the question that burned at the back of my mind, what had my family been hiding? The mansion was eerily quiet when I arrived back, the grand hallway stretching before me like a maze, its high ceilings shadowed in the dim morning light. The air was thick with the dust of forgotten years. I had to know what was hidden beneath the surface, and there was only one place left to look, my grandfather's study. The study was tucked away at the far end of the house, past the grand staircase, and down a narrow corridor lined with portraits of relatives I never knew. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and I stepped into the room that had always been off limits. It smelled of old leather, tobacco, and something faintly metallic, like a secret waiting to be uncovered. I ran my hand along the edge of the desk, the wood cool under my fingertips. My grandfather had spent hours in this room, making decisions that shaped our family's future. What had he been thinking when he wrote the will? What truth was he trying to protect? A sound interrupted my thoughts, a soft rustle behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the faint creak of the floorboards, as if the house itself was watching me. I exhaled slowly, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. But I couldn't. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. It wasn't just the house, it was Daniel. He was out there, somewhere, keeping secrets. I turned back to the desk. Papers were scattered across it, old files and documents I'd never seen before. One folder caught my eye. It was labeled with a name I didn't recognize, Carter Holdings. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside was a series of financial documents, contracts, and one letter, dated just 2 months before my grandfather's death. I scanned the letter quickly. My heart began to race as I read the words. The time is coming, and the foundation must be preserved. Ethan is the key. Trust him, or everything will be lost. The words felt like a punch to the gut. I was the key? What did that mean? My head spun as I tried to piece it together. And then it hit me, the foundation. My grandfather had been involved with some kind of organization, something far beyond what anyone had ever told me. Something powerful, dangerous, and hidden in plain sight. I dropped the letter on the desk, my mind whirling. If Daniel knew about this, if he was part of it, what else was he hiding? I heard the front door slam shut in the distance. My heart skipped a beat. Someone was home. I quickly stuffed the letter back in the folder and shoved it into the drawer. The study was quiet again, but the silence felt wrong. It felt like something was about to break. I wasn't alone. I didn't have to look up to know that Daniel was standing in the doorway. I could feel his presence, like a shadow at my back. "Looking for something?" he asked, his voice smooth, but with an edge to it. I turned slowly to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. What is all this? The foundation, the letter, what the hell is going on, Daniel? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to the drawer, and for a moment, I thought he was going to come closer. But instead, he just stood there, his hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. "I told you," he said finally, his voice low. "You don't want to know the truth. You think you do, but you don't." I stepped toward him, anger boiling inside me. "I need to know. You've been hiding something, Daniel. I can feel it. What's going on? What is the foundation?" His eyes hardened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something, fear. Guilt? He stepped back, as if distancing himself from me. "It's not what you think, Ethan," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The foundation isn't just a charity. It's a front. A cover-up for something much worse. And if you keep digging, you're going to get hurt. We are all going to get hurt." I felt the words hit me like a punch. My legs wobbled as I steadied myself against the desk. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "What happened to Grandpa? What happened to me?" Daniel took a deep breath and then leaned in, his voice almost inaudible. "You're not who you think you are, Ethan. None of us are. Your grandfather, he wasn't just a businessman. He was involved in things far darker than you could ever imagine." I swallowed, trying to process what he was saying. "What do you mean?" "I can't tell you everything." Daniel's eyes shifted nervously. "But you're already too deep. You've seen things. You've heard things. And you can't go back. No one can." My pulse was racing now. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. "What do I do, then?" "Get out," he said, the words coming out like a breath of air. "Get out before it's too late." The silence that followed was suffocating. We stood there, locked in a moment of tension so thick, it was impossible to breathe. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. There was no turning back, no safe place left. Not anymore. Suddenly, the door slammed open again, and I spun around. A tall figure stepped into the room, their face obscured by shadows. "Did you really think you could keep the truth hidden forever?" the figure asked, their voice cold and familiar. "Because the game's just begun." I froze. The figure stepped into the light, and my breath caught in my throat. It was my father. The room was still. Too still. My father stood in the doorway, his presence more imposing than I'd ever felt it before. My mind was racing, the weight of the words he had just spoken sinking into my chest like a stone. The game's just begun. I thought I knew the truth. I thought I'd uncovered the secrets buried deep within the mansion's walls, but this was something I hadn't prepared for. The man who had raised me, the man I had trusted my entire life, was standing before me, shrouded in darkness, revealing that everything I knew about my family was a lie. "Why, Dad?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Why didn't you tell me?" He stepped into the room, his shoes clicking on the hardwood floor, the sound sharp and deliberate. "Because I didn't want you to be involved," he replied, his voice as cold as the air around us. "But now that you're in, there's no turning back. You have no idea what you're dealing with." I stared at him, my body tense with anger and confusion. How could he be so calm, so collected, when the world around us was crumbling? You're part of this too, aren't you? I said, my words falling heavy between us. His expression flickered for a moment, just a flash of something that almost looked like regret, but then it was gone. He crossed the room to the desk, his fingers brushing over the files I had left there earlier, the ones that contained everything I needed to know. You've seen the papers, Ethan, he said, not turning to look at me. You've read the letter. This is bigger than anything you could ever imagine. Your grandfather, he was in too deep. He had connections, people who would do anything to protect what he built. And now, they're coming for all of us. I felt the air grow colder as he spoke. The weight of his words pressed down on me like a vice, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I had known there were secrets, but this was something else entirely. I didn't want you involved, my father continued, his tone softening. I wanted you to live a normal life, free from all of this. But now he trailed off, his voice thick with unspoken emotions. You found it. The truth. And now, you're a part of it whether you like it or not. A sudden, harsh knock on the door shattered the moment. My heart skipped a beat. We weren't alone. My father's eyes darted to the door, his body stiffening. He seemed to make a decision in that moment, his face hardening. It's time, Ethan, he said, his voice suddenly sharp again. We need to move quickly. Before I could react, he was at the door, pulling it open just a crack. I couldn't see who it was, but I could hear the low murmur of voices, the tension palpable in the air. I stepped forward, my pulse racing. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Dad, I said urgently. What's happening? What do we need to do? He didn't answer immediately, his gaze flicking nervously to the hallway outside. Then, without warning, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. You need to go. Right now. Take this. It's the only way out. I stared at him, confused. What's inside? It's a key, he said, his voice hushed. The key to everything. The foundation, the truth behind it all. If you want to survive, you need to follow the instructions. Everything you've been told, it's a lie. I took the envelope from his hand, my fingers shaking as I ripped it open. Inside was a single key, a small metal thing with an engraving I couldn't read. My father's hand grasped mine tightly, forcing me to look him in the eye. Trust no one, he warned, his grip tightening. Not even me. I didn't have time to process his words. A loud crash echoed from down the hall, followed by shouting. The house was no longer the safe haven I had once believed it to be. It was a prison, and we were the prisoners. Go, Ethan, my father urged, pushing me toward the door. You have to leave now. I didn't want to run. I didn't want to leave him behind. But I knew he was right. The walls were closing in, and there was no way out but forward. I bolted from the study, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway as I ran. Every instinct told me to stop, to turn back, but I couldn't. Not now. The mansion loomed behind me like a monster, its darkened windows watching, waiting. I didn't know who was after us or why, but I knew one thing, nothing would ever be the same again. I ran out the back door, the cool night air hitting my face as I darted toward the car parked out front. I had no plan, no idea where I was going. All I had was the key and the promise of answers. But what if those answers weren't what I wanted to hear? What if, in the end, the truth was worse than the lies? I slid into the car, slamming the door shut behind me. The engine roared to life, and I sped off into the darkness, the mansion disappearing in the rearview mirror. And as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone powerful, was still watching me. The truth was out there, but was I ready for it? The game had only just begun.